it's more of like, a philosophy or, um, just a way of, you know, thinking video. So, you know, I think many of my viewers are pretty young, so they're not really gonna watch this or relate to this. But as you can kind of tell by the title of the video, it's what we're gonna be talking about. So, I've never made a video like this, so I don't really know where to start. But, you know, as a Christian, right, we say, when you die, your end goal is to make it to heaven. We don't really know what heaven looks like. We have some type of idea from the Bible, but you can't really wrap your mind around it. So I was sitting in church today. Well, I would say yesterday, because, I'm making this at, 2:34. My phone. Okay. 2:34 in the morning. Right. 2:34. It's kind of weird to think about, that one day we just won't be here and we're just all gonna die someday. And I wouldn't say I'm scared of death, right? Because I'm really not, Um, I think I got a very good relationship with God, so, I'll make it into heaven. But what this whole video is about, I'm just kind of going on a side rant, is, you know, eternity and what that really looks like. Because eternity is so great, but at the same time, trying to think about it is so scary. Because in my head, what do you mean that we're gonna die, like, but our soul's gonna live forever? Like, forever is like, a long time. You can't really wrap your head around that. And the more you try to explain it, the more you can't, the more speechless you are. Um, I don't know. It's like, all I can really say is like, when we die, it's gonna last forever. And I don't know what that looks like. Obviously, it can be very good or very bad. But if we're thinking from, the heaven sense, right? What does that look like? It's almost like, I wouldn't say I don't want to live for eternity, but it's almost like so scary to think about, where it makes you question if you would really want that. And I think the big part of that is that, your worldly mind is thinking of, something like being on earth for eternity, right? But if I think of being on earth for eternity, it doesn't scare me as bad as, me thinking of being, you know, dead and my soul being in heaven, for eternity. And, trying to explain that to non believers, right? Saying, like, when you die, your soul's either going to go to heaven or hell for eternity. It's just kind of scary to think about, right? I don't know how long this video is going to be, right? Maybe it's going to be 5 minutes, maybe it's going to be an hour. Um, but it's just something I really struggle with, right? Um, and as I've gotten older, I've gotten so, you know, many more questions and so much more curious about, the way, life works and, just kind of how, um, like, I wouldn't say, like, I'm leaning towards a science, type of belief, because I'm not. I would, if you were to ask me, is God real, I would say 100%. But I think as a Christian, that's what makes me say 100%. I have, all these questions in my notes that I just don't really have anyone to ask. So I think I'm coming here to kind of vent. Um, like, there's no, you can't deny evolution, right? You can't deny that, snakes and lizards, evolved. So evolution's definitely a thing in life. Um, you know, but I don't personally believe that we evolved from, monkeys or apes or chimps or whatever you want to call it, right? So maybe I think that's just like a wild coincidence. So, I got all these questions in my notes. So, y'all gonna have to bear with me, right? And I don't know, maybe you will relate. So, the first one I have is, do we have free will if God knows what's gonna happen? Um, and where this stemmed from was, I was watching a video about free will, and it was like, do we really have free will? Like, let me ask you this question, right? Apple or banana? Now, let's say you picked apple, right? If we were to rewind 10 seconds ago, you would always pick apple when I asked you that question. There's not a universe. You wouldn't have. Okay? And that's because of your past experiences and past things you went through. Maybe you saw, a commercial for that, or, you were very hungry, so you had one, and you're like, it appealed to you again, right? But regardless, if we were to go back in time, right before I asked you that, you would have always answered that same thing, whether it was apple or a banana. So I think it's more of like the illusion of free will. Now, when it comes to beliefs, I think we have free will. Um, because, and all of these questions really contradict, what, the Bible and your beliefs talk about, right? Because, philosophy just kind of, goes against it because all the, all your answers are there in the Bible, but my mind just can't really, like, comprehend it. So, you know, that was my first one. I'm not real good at, explaining these things, so just kind of bear with me. I was sitting in class, I was doing, like this, I do this, co-op Christian school, right? So we pray before all that. And she was talking about how she fully believed that God could heal her son from, diabetes, right? He has diabetes. Um, and she fully believes, if he wanted to, like that, he would be cured. And once again, I would say, yeah, I fully believe that. But deep down in my heart, right, I don't really, like, I don't feel anything. I don't really, like, feel that, right? Like, if I were to ask you, what's your name? You'd say my name's Brandon, right? My name's Brandon. You fully believe your name's Brandon. What's the color of the sky? Sky's blue. You believe that, right? Now, um, I don't get like the same feeling of like if you were to ask me, my name's Kellen, right? Like I feel that in my body. So if you were to ask me, could do you believe God could heal His Son as a Christian, and as a believer in the Bible, I would say yeah, but I don't really feel anything. And when I'm at church, I raise my hands. I get goosebumps. I sing along, right? I feel like a presence there. So, feeling that like presence, like that warm spiritual presence, definitely makes me think, God does exist. But I guess this whole video is, I don't really feel him, or I'm just kind of confused with my faith. So I was really, wondering, leave your comments down below if you relate or you can, help me. But, I got a couple more. Um, what happens to people who have no way of knowing about God? Like the people on North Sentinel Island, right? They don't speak any known language. We don't have any way to communicate with them. Do they go to heaven or hell? They don't have any way to, talk with God, communicate, or I wouldn't even say talk with God, have a way to talk about God, or, what are their beliefs? So it's like, I really just find it, unfair. It's like, how does that happen? I know God talks about, if you're a baby and you die, you go to heaven because you're not old enough to comprehend, what God is or who God is or, the idea of it, right? Until you're about a toddler, maybe then, your parents start taking you to church and all that, right? Introducing you to the idea of God so you can grow up in that faith. But what is it, with them, right? Do they just get like a free pass into heaven or do they get sent to hell, right? We don't know, but it's something, I've thought about and I know other people have thought about and struggled with. And it's like, I just don't think it's fair because, the more you learn about God in the Bible, it talks about, the more you're expected to do, right? The more you read the Bible, the more you're expected to change, because you know more, right? So you don't know what you don't know, but the more you learn, the more God expects out of you. Um, so it's like either way, if you think about it, it's not fair. If they go to hell, it's not fair because we have no way to communicate. And I know there's a missionary who tried to talk with them but ended up dying. So either it's not fair because we've tried and we can't get through to them. So either they're going to hell. It's not really their fault. They don't understand, right? If they go to heaven, it's not fair to the people who have a way and like I don't I get, it's a blessing to be able to learn about God, right? But you get what I'm saying? I hope you do, right? I know I'm kind of skipping through these topics very fast, and I maybe repeating myself a lot. And, maybe this video is not even interesting me, but this is, more about me and me trying to connect with people who feel like, similar ways. Um, and I'm just reading out of my notes right now. My phone's right under my monitor. It says, and I guess I still trust and believe in God because I still pray and talk and ask for Him to help me. Right? If I didn't, not believe in God, I wouldn't even be making this video. I would have already written it off. And, I think I still have that want for God, right? Like, I still, want to feel Him, but I don't really feel Him outside of church. And, I've tried my best to, read my Bible, pray. And, like, when I pray, in my head, I have a feeling He's listening, but like I said, I don't, like, feel anything. And I guess that's kind of what confuses me. It's like these Christians and, people I look up to, right? Bryce Crawford, my youth pastor that I know, um, the people I talk to at church, they all talk about this feeling they have about, how God fills them with joy. And it's like, I try to be, a positive person, but I don't have that kind of joy they're talking about. And it's like, you know, I guess I'm being selfish. It's like, why can't I have that? Because, I'm desperately, like, searching for it. And, you know, I've, I've went through to other things before I went to God. I went to hang out with friends. I try to, block it out and fill my void with, relationships. Just talking to, multiple girls at the same time, playing video games. I've tried ignoring it. And then finally, I just, met with God. And I was like, and this is still like an ongoing thing, I was thinking about it all day today. It's like, you know, um, I just kind of want to feel like, something, um, that's from God. And I know, like, if I do feel something, I'll know, in my head, I feel like I'll know, that it's from Him. But, I, uh, I guess it's almost like another thing just throughout, my belief, I've struggled with God. I would pray, and in my head, right, in the forefront, I'd be praying like, I'm praying to praise God, talk with Him. But in the back of my head, in the back of my mind, deep down in my heart, I wanted something out of it, like, the streaming stuff, this is my dream, right? I don't want it just to be famous. I want it to, connect with kids who, feel like, an outcast or don't really have anything going for them, because that's kind of how I felt until I had this streaming, the streaming thing going for me. So then, the more I did it, I started getting closer with God, and then I kind of broke away from Him, because as I was praying, I kind of had something, deep down in my heart. I guess you would almost say it was like evil, right? Because I was praying, but not for the right reason. I was praying to get something from it instead of just praying, right? To receive, God's word and, talking with, the creator of the universe. And, um, I guess I'm kind of trying to wrap up this video. I don't really know how. Like I said, I don't make a lot of these videos. It's actually my first one. I hope to. I hope to, make more videos like this. I definitely enjoyed it. But, these are just like a lot of things I struggle with, as a Christian and as like, a 16-year-old guy. Um, I've struggled with, any sin you can, name. Um, I don't know, man. It's just, it really sucks because, I want it. Like, I guess you would say I, like, yearn for a relationship with Him, but I don't really feel anything. And, a lot of this stuff just doesn't make sense to me. Because as much as, I want to believe in God, it's like, I wouldn't say I want proof, I know people who, like, can't, like, they literally cannot believe in God because it does not make sense to them and they cannot comprehend, and I wouldn't even say they can't comprehend it. It's more of like they just don't understand because it does not make sense scientifically, you know. So that's just kind of how their brain was made. And I guess, that leads me into another topic. I'm just ranting now. Um, why is your brain made like that, right? I feel like everyone should have a fair chance at, having a relationship with God. And I think everyone does. But if God makes your brain work that way where you rely on science, um, I feel like it would just be much harder to have a relationship with Him. So, I don't know. I guess this is kind of like, you know, just topics I've had in my heart for, months now. So, I think something I really need to work on is praying to God, um, without, you know, hidden intentions behind my prayer, because, you know, nothing's hidden from God, right? Um, and, you know, the second thing I would take away is, I don't know. I don't know. I had it on my mind and I lost it. Um, Bear with me, guys. Oh, it was something to do with, dude, see, I'm thinking so fast I lost it. Anyways, like, hidden motives, yeah. I just need to stop having hidden motives and try to start fully trusting him. You know, I know when I'm going to bed in like 45 minutes, the thought will come to me, I'm like, dang it, bro. I knew it. That's what I should have said. But, you know, I hope you all have a good night. You know, let me know if you struggle with anything, you know, related to this, because I feel like I'm not the only one, and I guess that's why I'm trying to share it. Um, but, you know, I love y'all. You know, some new YouTube videos coming out soon. We'll be live tomorrow and all that. But, you know, I just hope this receives, like, the right people, and, you know, I hope y'all have a good night or good morning. So, I'll see y'all in the next video.